You think you can humiliate my business partner? You think you're above his son? Let go of me. You're out of your mind. I'll teach you some respect, you ungrateful little. Stop. Somebody help me. He's dragging me. Shut your mouth. You'll do exactly what I tell you, or you'll pay for it. My stepdad dragged me across the gravel driveway by my hair after I turned down his business partner's son. Hi, my name is Hannah. Today, I'm going to tell you my story. But before I continue, please like, share, and subscribe to hear more stories like this. I was 23 when my mom married Kenneth Briggs. She'd been widowed for 5 years after my dad died in a construction accident, and I guess loneliness finally got to her. Kenneth seemed charming at first, successful too. He owned a commercial janitorial company and always wore tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly wages. My mom, Carolyn, fell hard and fast. They got married within 8 months of meeting, and suddenly, everything changed. I was living at home while finishing my business degree at Portland State University. Money was tight, and staying with mom just made sense. When Kenneth moved in though, things shifted in ways I didn't expect. He had this way of taking over everything, redecorating the living room, changing house rules without discussion, acting like he'd owned the place for decades instead of days. Hannah, we need to talk about your contribution to this household, Kenneth said one morning at breakfast, about 2 months after the wedding. I help mom with groceries when I can, and I do all the cleaning in my room and the upstairs bathroom, I replied, confused. That's not enough. You're an adult now. You should be paying rent. My mom looked uncomfortable, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. Kenneth, we discussed this. She's still in school. She has a part-time job. She can contribute something. I started paying $300 a month, which was nearly half of what I made at the campus bookstore. My mom apologized privately later that day, but she never stood up to him. Not really. I wanted to push back harder, but I didn't want to cause problems for her. She seemed happy, or at least I thought she did. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way Kenneth would criticize her cooking, even though he never cooked himself. How he'd make decisions about the house, her house, without consulting her. The way he'd talk over her in conversations with his friends, like she wasn't even there. But when you're in it, you rationalize things. You tell yourself every relationship has its issues. You tell yourself it'll get better. The real problem started when Kenneth's business partner, Douglas Fletcher, came over for dinner one night with his son Colton. Douglas and Kenneth had partnered up to expand the janitorial business into 3 neighboring counties. They were making serious money, or so Kenneth constantly reminded us, dropping figures at dinner like they were casual observations about the weather. Colton was 26, worked for his dad's company doing accounting, and had the personality of damp cardboard. He spent the entire dinner talking about his cryptocurrency portfolio and his new Mercedes. He barely asked me any questions, just talked at me about his accomplishments, his investments, his plans to buy property in Bend. Hannah's studying business administration, my mom said, trying to include me in the conversation. Oh yeah. Douglas said, perking up. You should come work for us after graduation. We could use someone young with fresh ideas. Maybe, I replied politely, though I had zero interest in working for any company Kenneth was involved with. Colton looked me up and down in a way that made my skin crawl. You single? I'm focused on school right now. That's not what I asked, he said with a smirk that probably worked on other women but did absolutely nothing for me. Then the answer is no. I'm not interested in dating. After they left, Kenneth pulled me aside in the kitchen while Mom cleared dishes. Colton's interested in you. Douglas mentioned it. This could be really good for our family. Good for our family? I just met him. He comes from money, Hannah. He's educated, has a future. You could do a lot worse. I'm not interested in being set up like some business transaction. His face hardened, the friendly mask slipping. You're being ungrateful. I'm trying to help you. I don't need that kind of help. You need every help you can get. You're 23, living at home, working retail. Where exactly do you think your life is heading? The comment stung because I had my own insecurities about my situation. I wasn't where I thought I'd be at 23. But I wasn't desperate enough to date someone just because his family had money. Over the next few weeks, Kenneth kept pushing. He'd invite Douglas and Colton over constantly, always engineering situations where Colton and I would end up alone, sending us both to grab drinks from the garage fridge, asking us to pick up takeout together, suggesting we all watch a movie and then conveniently disappearing with Douglas into his office. Colton asked me out 3 times. I declined politely each time, giving different excuses, hoping he'd take the hint. Work was busy. I had exams coming up. I needed to help my mom with something. What's wrong with you? Kenneth cornered me in the kitchen after the 3rd rejection. Do you know how this makes me look? Douglas thinks you're playing games. I'm not playing anything. I'm just not interested. You're being selfish. This partnership is important to me, and you're jeopardizing it with your attitude. My mom tried to mediate, her voice small. Kenneth, she can't force feelings. Maybe they're just not compatible. Stay out of this, Carolyn. Your daughter needs to learn how the world works. The world doesn't work by forcing people into relationships they don't want, I shot back. No, but it works by understanding opportunity when you see it. Colton could give you a life your mother and I never could. I don't want a life handed to me by some guy I don't even like. His jaw clenched, and I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. But he just turned and walked away, leaving me shaking in the kitchen while my mom stared at the floor. Things escalated when Colton showed up at the bookstore where I worked. He'd never mentioned knowing where I worked, which meant either Kenneth told him or he'd looked it up himself. Neither option was okay. Hey Hannah. He appeared at my register during a slow afternoon. Thought I'd stop by and see if you wanted to grab coffee. Colton, I'm working. And I've told you, I'm not interested in dating right now. Come on, just coffee. What's the harm? The harm is I've said no multiple times, and you keep pushing. His friendly demeanor cracked like thin ice. You know, my dad's been talking to Kenneth. They think you're being really rude. I don't care what they think. I don't owe you anything. He leaned closer across the counter, lowering his voice so my coworker couldn't hear. You're making problems for your family. Kenneth's business depends on keeping my dad happy. Then maybe Kenneth should focus on actual business instead of pimping out his stepdaughter. Colton's face went red. You're going to regret saying that. He left without another word, and I knew I'd crossed a line. But I was tired of being polite while everyone ignored what I wanted. I was tired of being treated like a bargaining chip in Kenneth's business deal. That night, all hell broke loose. I came home around 8 after my shift and evening class. Kenneth was waiting in the living room, and I could tell immediately he'd been drinking. There was a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels on the coffee table, and his eyes had that glassy, unfocused look that made my stomach drop. Douglas called me today, he said before I'd even closed the door. Said Colton went by your work and you humiliated him. I didn't humiliate anyone. I told him I'm not interested, like I've done before. You called me a pimp. You told Colton I was pimping you out. My mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Kenneth, please, let's just calm down and talk about this. I'm done talking. This little brat has disrespected me, disrespected Douglas, and now she's spreading lies about me. They're not lies, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You've been pushing me toward Colton since the day I met him, trying to force something for your business deal. He stood up fast, swaying slightly. Everything I've done has been for this family. I took you and your mother in, gave you a home, and this is how you repay me? You didn't take us in. You married my mom and moved into her house. The slap came out of nowhere. My cheek exploded in pain, and I stumbled backward into the wall, my vision blurring. My mom screamed, but it sounded distant, like I was underwater. Garrett, no. What are you doing? Teaching her respect. He grabbed my arm, yanking me toward the front door. His grip was iron, fingers digging into my bicep hard enough to bruise. I tried to pull away, but he was stronger, so much stronger than I'd realized. Let go of me. He opened the door and shoved me outside. I tripped down the porch steps, catching myself on the railing. When I tried to go back inside, he blocked the doorway, his body filling the frame. You want to act like you're too good for this family? Then get out. This is my mother's house. You can't kick me out. That's when he grabbed my hair. I felt his fist close around my ponytail, and then he was dragging me. I screamed, my scalp burning, my hands clawing at his grip. The gravel driveway tore into my knees and palms as he pulled me down toward the street. Pain shot through me with every inch, sharp rocks cutting into my skin, blood warm on my hands. You think you can humiliate my business partner? You think you're above his son? Let go of me. You're out of your mind. I'll teach you some respect, you ungrateful little stop. Somebody help me. He's dragging me. Shut your mouth. You'll do exactly what I tell you, or you'll pay for it. My mom finally ran out and grabbed his arm. Kenneth, stop. You're hurting her. Stop it right now. A neighbor, Mr. Patterson from 2 houses down, was suddenly there too, still in his work clothes. Hey, what's going on here? Let her go. Kenneth released my hair, breathing hard. I scrambled away, my hands and knees bleeding, my scalp throbbing. Mr. Patterson helped me up while his wife called 911 from their doorway. You're crazy, I said, touching my head where clumps of hair had been ripped out. My fingers came away bloody. Get off my property, Kenneth snarled. It's not your property, my mom said quietly, and something in her voice had changed, something hard and final. It's mine. The house is in my name. My first husband left it to me. The police arrived within 10 minutes. I gave a statement, showed them my injuries. They took photos of everything, the blood on my hands and knees, the torn scalp, the handprint already forming a bruise on my face. The officer, a woman named Deputy Anderson, was gentle but thorough. Has he done anything like this before? She asked. No, but he's been controlling. Demanding. This is the first time it got physical. That you know of, Deputy Anderson said, glancing at my mom, who stood pale and shaking on the porch. They arrested Kenneth for assault and domestic violence. My mom didn't say a word in his defense. She just watched as they put him in the back of the patrol car, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. At the hospital, they documented everything. The lacerations on my knees and palms. The bruising on my scalp. The missing hair. The handprint on my face. A nurse gave me a pamphlet about domestic violence resources that I stared at without really reading. I filed for a restraining order the next morning, with my mom beside me. I'm filing for divorce, my mom said in the parking lot afterward, her voice quiet but firm. I can't believe I let him do that to you. I should have stopped this months ago. He fooled both of us, Mom. No. She shook her head, tears finally spilling over. I saw signs. I just didn't want to admit I'd made another mistake. After your father, I thought Kenneth was my second chance. You'll have other chances. Real ones. The divorce proceedings revealed things we hadn't known. Kenneth had been hiding debt, lots of it. The business expansion with Douglas was funded almost entirely by loans Kenneth had taken out personally, using inflated projections and falsified revenue reports. Douglas had put in significantly less money, and their partnership agreement gave Douglas majority control. Kenneth had basically bet everything on the expansion working. When word spread about Kenneth's arrest, Douglas distanced himself immediately. He dissolved the partnership, leaving Kenneth holding all the debt and none of the expanded business. The janitorial company collapsed within 3 months. Kenneth's original clients, the ones who'd kept the business afloat for years, heard about the assault and quietly took their contracts elsewhere. Nobody wants to do business with a man who drags his stepdaughter across a driveway by her hair. Kenneth tried to contest the divorce, claiming he deserved half of my mom's house and savings. His lawyer argued he'd contributed to the household, made improvements, invested in the family's future. My mom's lawyer destroyed that argument with bank records showing Kenneth had actually drained their joint account by $20,000 for his failed business venture without telling her. He spent my money trying to impress his business partner while demanding rent for my daughter, my mom told the mediator, her voice steady. He contributed nothing but debt and violence. The criminal case was straightforward. Multiple witnesses. Medical documentation. Mr. Patterson's testimony. The fact that his wife had taken video on her phone of the aftermath, me bleeding in their driveway, Kenneth shouting from our porch, my mom crying and trying to help me up. Kenneth was convicted of assault and sentenced to 18 months, with 3 years probation after. But the real consequences went deeper. Kenneth's arrest made local news because of the business angle and because the video had been shared on social media. His reputation was destroyed overnight. The few clients he had left dropped him. Douglas gave interviews painting himself as an innocent partner who'd been deceived, which wasn't entirely true, but it protected Douglas's interests. Colton called me once during all this. "This is your fault," he said without preamble. "My dad lost money because of you." "No, your dad lost money because he partnered with an abusive criminal. That's on both of them. You ruined everything because you couldn't just go on a few dates." I ruined everything? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Your dad and Kenneth tried to trade me like property for a business deal. How about you blame the actual people responsible?" He hung up. I heard later that Douglas's company took a hit too, not because of financial losses, but because people didn't want to work with someone who'd been so closely associated with Kenneth. The video had made rounds on local social media. Douglas's name was attached to the story, his face in photos at business events with Kenneth. Douglas ended up selling his company and retiring early, reportedly at a significant loss. Part of me felt bad, not for him, but for the employees who lost their jobs. But mostly I just felt tired. I graduated that spring with my degree. My mom and I moved to a smaller house in a better neighborhood in Beaverton, selling the old place because neither of us wanted the memories. She went back to work as a nurse, something she'd quit when she married Kenneth because he'd said she didn't need to work. "I lost myself," she told me one night over pizza in our new kitchen. "I thought having someone would make life easier, but I stopped trusting my own judgment." We both learned from it. You stood up for yourself. I should have done that from the start. I got a job at a marketing firm in downtown Portland, entry level, but with room to grow. On my first day, my boss, a woman named Angela, asked about the scar on my palm from the gravel. "Long story," I said. "I've got time if you ever want to share it." Eventually, I did. Angela had her own history with a controlling ex-husband. We became friends beyond just co-workers. She taught me things about setting boundaries in professional settings, about recognizing manipulation tactics, about trusting my instincts even when other people said I was overreacting. 2 years later, I ran into Colton at a coffee shop in the Pearl District. He looked rough, tired, dark circles under his eyes, cheaper clothes than he used to wear. I almost left, but he saw me first. "Hannah." "Hey, Colton. Look, I wanted to apologize. For how I acted, for everything. I was young and stupid and listened to my dad too much." "Okay. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say? Your apology doesn't change what happened. You and your dad and Kenneth treated me like an object. I don't forgive that. I'm trying to make amends here. I don't need your amends. I needed you to respect me back then. And you didn't. We're done." I walked out, my coffee forgotten on the counter. Some people think forgiveness is healing, but sometimes the healing is in walking away and never looking back. Kenneth got out of prison after 14 months for good behavior. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he moved to Arizona, working odd jobs, still bitter about how things had turned out. My mom's restraining order was permanent. He tried to send her a letter once, apologizing and asking for another chance. She burned it without reading past the first line. "I don't need his sorry," she said, watching the paper curl and blacken in the fireplace. "I need him gone." My mom started dating again eventually, but carefully this time. She went to therapy, worked on herself, learned to recognize red flags. I did too. We talked about patterns we'd ignored, about how Kenneth had isolated her from friends, about how he'd made her doubt herself. "He told me you were difficult," my mom admitted in one session, tears streaming down her face. "That you were stubborn and needed guidance. I believed him sometimes, instead of believing you. You believe me now. That's what matters." Life moved forward. I got promoted twice at the marketing firm, moved into my own apartment in the Alphabet District, dated people who respected boundaries. I had a relationship that lasted a year with someone who understood that when I said no to something, I meant it. It ended amicably when he took a job in Seattle, but it taught me what healthy looked like. Every now and then, I'd touch the scar on my palm or catch my reflection and see the slight unevenness in my hairline where it grew back differently. Reminders, but not anchors. I wasn't defined by what Kenneth did. I was defined by how I responded. 3 years after the assault, I was promoted to marketing director. At 28, I was the youngest person in that role at the firm. Angela, who'd become a mentor and friend, took me out to celebrate. "You know what I admire about you," she said over champagne at a rooftop bar overlooking the Willamette River. "You didn't let what happened make you smaller. A lot of people would have. I got lucky. I had support. You had strength. Support helps, but you had to choose to use it." I thought about that a lot, about choice. Kenneth had tried to take my choices away, to make me into what he needed for his business deals. And when I refused, he tried to break me. Instead, he'd broken himself. The best revenge wasn't some elaborate plan. It was watching Kenneth's life crumble under the weight of his own choices while I built something better. He tried to control me, to use me, and ended up losing everything: his business, his marriage, his freedom, his reputation. All because he couldn't accept that I had the right to say no. I lost some blood and hair on gravel that night. But I gained something more important: the absolute certainty that I'd never let anyone treat me that way again. Would you have pressed charges immediately? Or would you have given your stepdad a chance to apologize?